My name is Jason Dunda. I'm a Chicago-based artist. I am one of those people, that kind of always wanted to be an artist, which I think is actually the worst kind of artist. I remember the moment actually in high school where I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. And it was actually, it was one of those, it's not, it's not necessarily like a very inspiring story. It was the only thing I was ever good at. So, and the only thing I ever wanted to kind of work too hard to do. I think I was about 16 or so when I realized, like, oh yeah, okay, this is something that I can spend my time on, and so instead of going out like on Friday and Saturday nights, I would stay in and like work on paintings and drawings when I was a teenager. I'm not someone who sticks with one idea or one way of making for very long. I think I did a residency a couple years ago, and the nickname they gave me was the Great Iterator. So I just kind of, I like to figure things out, and I like to discover things and experiment with things, and there's something about the results of that are most satisfying to me. So when things get a little bit too known and too comfortable for me, I move on to something else. And that goes with ideas and with, I think, with materials. But I think if we were to narrow something down, lately in the last 10 years or so, I've been interested in the figure and the portrait. More so I think the specific idea of what it means to make a portrait of someone. I'm specifically interested in the portrait as an icon unto itself. So what are the conditions around which someone makes a portrait of someone? It's usually to acknowledge their importance or to render importance on someone who is not important. So it's that kind of attention and labor placed upon the likeness, creating the likeness of someone that I think I'm particularly interested in. All that said, everything that I've been doing is actually this kind of caricature to the point of just the dissolving and the elimination of the likeness of a face or a head and shoulders. So there is this kind of, someone pointed out the last artist talk I gave that there was kind of a violence to that, to distort someone's face, to eliminate it, and I think that's a really, really interesting thing, because I think there is a lot of parody, caricature, or critique that's involved in that. But then I'm also going through old family photos as well as some of my source material. So that's a really interesting thing I'm trying to figure out right now as well. So I guess thinking about with that part of my work, with sort of abstracting old family photographs, and also working from memory, I'm thinking about how abstraction and memory kind of work together, and how memory is a form of abstraction. The piece that was a cultivator, the giant 6 foot tall head, it's actually part of a body of work that I consider complete, that I've sort of moved on from. But it was about looking at sort of the bad players in socio-political narratives. So the head that was at Cultivator was the head of Blaise Supich, who is the Archbishop of Chicago, I believe. He didn't have good things to say about the child abuse scandal that was going on in the Catholic Church. So I look at him as a figure of authority who's maybe engaging in, wittingly or unwittingly, some kind of abuse of power. So I created, I gathered a number of AP photographs, news photographs of him, trying to get every angle, and looked at those to create this thing. And this is the strata you're seeing, the lines that kind of go across. These are, I think, 1.5 or 2 inch thick pieces of pink foam that you get from Home Depot, that I put together with some kind of industrial adhesive, and then so it became just like a block, like a cube of foam that I just kind of started hacking away at with a drywall knife and a pull saw. So it's really a very rough and kind of gestural and also really physically taxing process to do it. And I equate it a lot with drawing as well. I feel like my entry point, because I'm completely self-taught with sculpture, with like subtractive sculpture. And my entry point to it, I actually literally got out my old figure drawing textbooks to think about plane. So turning front plane, side plane in illusion into the actual thing in space. And it took a long time for me to figure that out, actually, because I live in flat land. I live in 2-dimensional space a lot. So yeah, there's something like really, really kind of physically almost cathartic about making this thing, this head that's bigger than you. With these kind of slashing gestures. I think there's also something really, I don't believe in art therapy in the studio. I believe in art therapy, but not doing it on yourself. But there was something very therapeutic about describing the face of someone and slashing away at something, given their participation in the particular narrative that I was critiquing. So.
Jason's piece, the giant pink head out by the meadow was perfect. And I loved how he ended up leaving it on the wheelbarrow that he was using to transport it out there. The thought that there's like this clergy's head out in the middle of Bray Farm was kind of funny. But you didn't need to know that, because just seeing that there's this giant head was visually disturbing out in the middle of the farm field, but also enjoyable. It's humorous, and then just the positioning of the head, where he's kind of like slightly looking off to the side. So he's not like staring straight on at you. I thought that was really, really great. And then Jason's collage of materials that he did out there, which some could say is like a painting, was wonderful because it's kind of a combination of a lot of elements that he uses. He does a lot of sewing, a lot of different materials, and just the way he draped it, and basically composed it on spot. Um, Amongst the grapevine poles, I thought that was really, really wonderful.
I have this pretty strict policy of like first thought is never best thought. So what I envisioned was because it was an outdoor space, hanging up the fabric works on a clothesline. The first thing I thought of was like, oh yeah, each one of the individual things needs its own space. There were poles kind of sticking up out of the ground, so I chose 5 and did that. It looked straightforward, and something about it didn't sit right with me, so that's when I started moving around and really kind of almost like making a drawing in space, making a composition. So where are there going to be more, where's there going to be more activity on that line of, of the fibrous pieces? Where are they going to overlap and maybe obscure one another? And so that just led to kind of pushing them all into these the big piles of fabric where essentially I started abstracting them. So you can't really tell where one begins and the other ends. The first time I heard Larry Lee before I saw him, and because he's got a very booming voice, as we know. It's because he's hard of hearing. I was in an elevator. I was at like right at the front of the elevator, and in back was this very, very loud, incredibly like Midwestern, specifically Chicago accented voice. And I'm like, who is that talking? I was brand new in America, so I was really, really interested in American accents. And I sort of glanced behind me and I'm like, is it that Chinese dude with the like super thick Chicago accent? That's really interesting. And lo and behold, it turned out to be him. We were teaching in the same department, and we had similar themes to different sections of the same class. It was a studio-based research class. His was Remake the Sequel, and mine was called Things That Look Like Other Things. So it was about, kind of iteration, and then also faithful or unfaithful copies of things for in my case. And so we decided, or more so he decided, and I went along with the idea that we would teach together a class about humor, sarcasm, hyperbole to first-year art students whose brains literally had not yet formed a sense of irony. So that was a bit of a struggle sometimes. And our syllabus was done in Victorian prose with like flowery script and whatnot. And it was a trip. It was a real trip. And so we put on an awards banquet for one class as a group performance. And then that kind of just naturally, very, very naturally, went into this collaborative improvisatory performance where we dress up like chefs for some reason and talk about things.
Here we are. Welcome
everyone.
To yet another episode of the International Chefs of Mystery.
The specific thing that made us chefs was there was a summer group show that was supposed to be like very playful, called Booze and Bacon. So booze and bacon, fried pork. And we decided to dress up like bad bakers and be booed by the audience while we were baking. So it became Booze and Bacon, BAKIN apostrophe. And we thought it was a one-off thing, but we already had the uniforms, so we just kept doing it. And now really being chefs has nothing to do, well, nothing and everything to do with whatever we talk about.
How do we improve upon a classic from the Depression era? Because can you go back a little bit on the history of the Jackson potluck?
The Jackson potluck, well, it's
I mean, we studied this at Hamburger U,
it's true. And Blair, I know all about it, but I'd rather hear it from you.
And we have gotten visiting artist gigs and now documentaries, feature documentaries made about us. So it's I don't know, people seem to like it. I think it's the most ridiculous thing ever, and I'm a little bit afraid of it. But and there's always this moment where my students sort of find it online, and I'm just like, we're not talking about that.
Canada.
So there's something about having someone outside of yourself to bounce off of that is it brings out the humor in my work. I don't think there's a lot of humor in what I do alone, because I think maybe I just care too much or something, which I've been trying to get over for a long time.
And has that helped? Actually, has it kind of helped your other art to sort of be able to let go as?
Yes, but it's not funnier. Like, my other art is not funny, but I right now, I think more than any other time in my life, I know less about what I'm doing in my studio work, and I'm doing a lot more of it. So I think it maybe hasn't loosened up the sense of humor, but it's just definitely loosened up something in the expression. Like, I'm just trusting it more. I'm not trying to control maybe the why portions of it, like why I'm doing something. I just do it. I'm more careless in a really productive way, and I think it's kind of working. I mean, the why should be ultimately, and this is usually what I come to, the why is like, well, this is what I do. It's like, if I know what to do, I go to the studio. If I don't know what to do, I go to the studio. So it's like, I do that, and why do I do it? I do it because I do it. I think for me, actually, there's a sign up here that you might want to shoot, but it's what crossed out and then how. So it's, if we're talking about like, what, where, why, and how, I'm forcing myself to care less about what I'm making and care more about how I'm making it.